All right. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode titled The Highs and the Lows. We'll talk about the emotional roller coaster that sales can be and how we can navigate this in our day to day as sales professionals. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce a friend of mine, Tim Perreira. Tim, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is I'm excited today. Feels like it's going to be a good combo.
Yeah, man. I mean, and just for context for anyone that's listening, um, we Tim and I were just chatting about how like-minded people can kind of attract each other. And when you put that out into the universe, what could happen? And I think that's a prime example of where we're at with this conversation today. Um, Tons to talk about. I'd love to maybe just start out with hearing a little bit about your story to kick things off, if that's cool with you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, man, I'll leave it there.
Yeah. So, I think maybe I'll start a few years back, and I had a career, I would say, in sales. I went from technical sales and I went into sports sales, right? I was selling season tickets and memberships and groups and suites and all that fun stuff for the San Diego Padres, go Pods, hometown team.
Yeah, man.
And then, ultimately got into tech sales. And then before that, I grew up playing sports. I played baseball through college, and I share that because a really challenging time for me was transitioning from, baseball, Tim, which was everything for me since I was, really when I started to get into it, probably 7 or 8 years old. And then all of a sudden I'm 21, 22, and I knew I wasn't going to play professionally. And I had to figure out, this next chapter of my life. And it was really challenging. It was really difficult. And I bring that up because, we go through that as humans.
Mhm.
Um, whether it is the first time we have a kid, whether we get laid off from a job, whether we change careers, we move cities, we move in with our partner, for people that have had kids and now become empty nesters, like it shows up in so many different ways. And so it's a process, right? It's kind of changing our identity or recreating our identity, I would say. So that was really the first one. And I struggled with that for a few years and found my footing in sales
Mhm.
because it made sense to me. It was like, man, I can, work on my craft. I clearly can reap the rewards of effort, hard work, improving myself, like being into doing something. And then, so I did that. And I poured everything into my job and I loved it. I loved it. I was excited. I got into the office early. I left late.
Mhm.
It was a period of my life where I was like, oh man, I had all this energy from baseball and my competitiveness. And now I have something to channel it into. And so I did that for a few years, and I basically had reached all the goals I set for myself in a couple of years in sales, and I was left kind of scratching my head and wondering what was next. And I'd made the money, I got the titles, I moved from San Francisco to New York City to manage my own sales office and two different sales teams. And I was looking at my goals. I was like, oh, I don't even know. Okay, like I did these, but why do I not feel fulfilled or happy? And actually I'm starting to feel worse, So
Yeah.
then I started to do things like I started drinking more on the weekends, got into some party drugs, like
Mhm.
just was really not in a position to understand feelings and emotions and what was coming up, and being able to discern them and read them and understand, okay, what is this trying to tell me? And I say all of that stuff because that experience is what led me to really doing what I do now. Because for 4 years or so, I was on a pretty steady decline after reaching, the pinnacle of number one rep in the world, MVP, managing my
Mhm.
own team, making more money than I ever thought possible at age 27.
Yep.
And so then the next few years, I really went through a roller coaster of depression, anxiety, feeling stuck, directionless, unmotivated, questioning everything I was doing. Like I was ready to up and bounce to Australia to go bartend and coach CrossFit. I had my visa. I was like 4 weeks away. I was gone, dude. It wasn't even
Oh
just.
man. Oh.
And so anyway, so after doing that, my performance kept tanking and I got fired, which
Mhm.
was a long fall from where I had been. And so a lot of questioning who I was, what I wanted, what life meant to me. And I ended up, working really hard to overcome depression and ultimately start my own business. And that led me into, being really like a mindset and wellness coach for men that's rooted in community. So also connecting men together,
Mhm.
and really helping guys like avoid all the shit that I went through first and foremost,
Yeah.
but start to create a life that they love, something that they're into, like that revolves around like health and wellness and passion and, like creating something for their life that they're proud of.
Yeah.
And that fires them up every day. So that's kind of how I ended up here and got here. And yeah, it's been fun. And I feel like it's still just getting started. But
Yeah.
yeah, thankful for going through all that stuff, and of course, like here to be able to talk about it today.
Totally, man. And I think, first of all, thank you for sharing that. I think it takes a lot to be vulnerable with your story, and I can relate to a lot of things you said as well, where we kind of go through the motions in life. We do the things because maybe we're told that's what you have to do to be quote unquote successful. And the fact that you were able to have that moment of like, okay, something's not right, I need to do something about it, is amazing, man. Because there's a lot of people that just keep running through that, and the fear of doing something about it can kind of consume them a little bit. So
Mhm.
very, very, very powerful that you were able to not only do something about it, but also realize that, hey, this isn't for me. And the Australia piece, I can definitely relate to. I mean, I did that in an earlier stage, kind of before I dove into the career, but I found myself as well. I quit a few roles because I knew that it wasn't right, but I didn't know what I wanted. And I was also, I can relate to
Yeah.
a lot of what you're saying. I was lost, man. I just was, it's a really empty feeling when you feel lost in that sense. And at the time, I had a lot of concussions. I was in a very, very dark place as well. And I think back to that version of me and the things I would tell that person now, it just shows that transformation and that journey. So
Mm.
I think the fact that we're here today talking about this is really powerful for any listeners around. First of all, it's okay if you're feeling this way, and it's okay if you're not on the right track for maybe what you envision your life to be, but reminding them that there's opportunity to do something about it, and you can control this life, like you said, with controlling doing things that light you up and you're aligned with. There's so much control we have where I think sometimes we think that we might not have that much. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's really powerful, man.
Yeah, dude, that's a great way to think about it, because I think the shift that I felt in my life was, I knew what I needed to do to be in shape physically. I had been
Hmm.
training my butt off baseball for a long time. I spent a lot of time in the gym. I researched nutrition. I was like, what do I got to do for good sleep? Like I had dabbled a little bit with meditation during that time.
Hmm.
And so I had this sense of control over my physical body, but I just I it things didn't click with the mindset or the mental side. And so really my turning point, what I like to share is like when did it click? And so
Hmm.
after I was fired, pretty low, I was like, what the fuck do I do? Like, do I go back into sales?
Hmm.
Like I kind of know how that's gonna feel. Like do I try and find another high paying job? I'm like, I know it's not the money. I already know that. Like
Yeah.
what am I like? What is this voice in my head trying to convince me? Like I know this. Okay.
Hmm.
So I need to like that voice, shut up. Like you're not helping. I've been listening to you for so like way too long.
Yeah.
And I heard the idea, wasn't a new idea, but it hit me at the right, one of those things that hits you at the right time. And you're like, oh my gosh, that of course, like, where has this
Hmm.
been? And it was the idea that everything in our life is objectively neutral and all meaning comes from within our own mind.
Hmm.
And in that moment, everything in the past 10 years, whatever, just flashed, just immediate. I was like, oh my gosh, I had moved 16 times in 12 years. I changed jobs 4 times in 4 years. I moved across country 3 times in 4 years, and all of them on 3 weeks' notice or less. Like I was up and going, I
Hmm.
was seeking change. I was okay. I was embracing it. But anyway, hearing that, things just clicked. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's me. Like
Hmm.
this suffering, what I'm feeling is actually because of me. It's because of what I'm thinking. No wonder everything I've tried hasn't been able to work.
Yeah.
And so that moment, what I felt there was that somebody took me and placed me in the driver's seat and said, learn how to drive.
Hmm.
And so it was that moment where I was like, okay, I don't know what to do to rewire my mind and to like learn about my thoughts and beliefs and everything. But was like, all right, let me start listening to podcasts. Let me grab every book I can find. Let me start. I hear people say morning routine's great. I'm going to do a morning routine. I hear people
Mhm.
say cold shower helps with mental health and boosting your mood and focus. Okay, I'm going to start taking cold showers. Like I'm going to start writing every day. I'm going to meditation was a scary thing. I'm like, I don't know how this is going to play out. I can't sit with my thoughts, but I'm like, screw it. I'm going to see if that works. And
Yep.
so I just started trying everything and started to
Mhm.
see what I liked, what worked, what didn't. And I think again, like because I felt so much agency on my ability to change, like I knew I could change. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what it would look like, but I was like, I can fucking change. I know
Mhm.
this. Like I'll
Mhm.
put in the work. Like I'm not afraid of that. And just it was again, it was just somebody like steered my focus to be like, you're looking in the wrong place. You need to look over here.
Mhm.
Now you're in the driver's seat, take off. And it just gave me such a sense of like, oh, I am the one in control of all this.
Oh man. Yeah, I love that. And for me too, I love also what you had said earlier about, maybe not hitting rock bottom, but hitting these low points and kind of turning it into a bit of gratitude towards that. Like for me, when I was burnt out and when I had my concussions, I was in such a low place and such a rock bottom state that anything was better. And it
Yeah.
it forced me to really do the work. I hit a point where I was like, I have no option. I can either suffer in this state and go down this very dark path or do something about it. And I had a similar moment where I decided to put myself in the driver's seat as well. And I think for everyone that moment is different, but it is a very powerful moment when you do put yourself in that driver's seat and learn to kind of take control of that. And then you begin to, envision what you're aligned with and what excites you. Like for me, man, just to your point of like, I don't know what to do, but I'm just going to try the things. Like I like dabbled in yoga here and there, but I was like, yeah, I'm just going to become a yoga teacher. And I did the training, all the work to become a yoga teacher and a meditation teacher. And to this day, like people always say, like, oh man, like yoga teacher training, like that's great. What's the best thing about it? And the truth is, the best thing about it was the inward growth. It's not even about teaching yoga. It wasn't even about
Mhm.
ever teaching yoga. It equipped me with this knowledge and this skill set to be where I'm at today. I hit that low point. I enrolled in this yoga teacher training and I came out of it a very different person with a lot more awareness of the state I was in and with some tools to do something about it. So I think it's just so powerful as well to shift that perspective and understand that these lows can be some of the best things that ever happened to you. Like I don't think we'd probably be here right now if it wasn't for that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a big piece of it too, especially the guys I work with. Like there's
Yeah.
still a lot of negative self-talk or shame or guilt about the things that we go through.
Yeah.
And what I really try to encourage guys to do is is again to think like an athlete a little bit more,
Mm.
and to be like, okay, like we don't have to make things mean anything about us. Like we can just use them as opportunities. Like we use them as feedback. We use them as signals, right? I think that's one of the things where men really kind of, step on their own foot is we avoid feelings and emotions because we feel like they mean something about us and they make us weak or anything. But it's like, no, dude, you're literally a human being.
Mhm.
You were born with a certain biology, like you are privy to the full range of feelings and emotions as every other human on earth.
Mhm.
Okay. And the more like you can just accept that, and it doesn't mean anything about you as an individual. It's just like, no, dude, you're an animal on earth and like you have this stuff. So okay, let's check that box. Cool. Now if you're really interested in growing and becoming the best version of you and like leaning into that, that type of life, like these are beautiful ways and like beautiful signals and feedback to start listening to.
Mhm.
Like that's really all they are. They're not saying, something is wrong with you. They're saying, hey, something is wrong. Let's pay
Mhm.
attention. Let's fix it. Like that's why they're there. They're trying to communicate to you that, hey, we got to fix some shit.
Yep.
Okay. And so leaning into it and yeah, really just trying to use them for your own good. Like, what is my body trying to tell me right now? Like,
Mhm.
what is this experience, this thing that I'm feeling? Like, what is that really trying to say to me right now? Like, I
Yeah.
have to pay attention. we know what happens when you don't when you don't pay attention and you bury it and you keep trying to numb it and move past hoping it goes away. By the way, spoiler, like that shit never goes away. Bubbles
I
under, it's
know.
going to show up one way or another. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, man. And I think also talking about this from the lens or perspective as a man is important as well. Like, I don't think we talk about this enough as men. So that alone is really powerful.
Yeah.
But I would also love to shift this perspective into the lens of a sales professional as well. So let's
Mhm.
think about that as well, right? These highs and these lows that we have when we're selling. Like, I personally felt like the highs were so high and the lows were so low, and it just did not seem sustainable to be able to navigate when that was happening. Like, how did you, when you, or maybe the you now, how would you go back,
Mhm.
or what advice would you give to the sales rep that's struggling with that, that is like, having the tough month or the tough quarter, and they're in a really really dark place, they're riding the high, they're riding the low, they're in that cycle. Do you
Yeah.
have any, I guess, thoughts for that individual?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, it still is something that I do because I still, I still have sales calls, I guess, right? I still have consultations where I
Yep.
talk with guys about what they're going through and if working with me is the right fit. And like I'm still affected by people that say yes to work with me or not. Like
Yep.
that's how I make money. So still I'm in it. And I think what I really try and work on, because still, like when you're in that role, clear, like especially if there's like a leaderboard and you're getting paid based off of performance, like it's easy to just only get caught up in the outcome in whatever you're working on. And I think what I constantly always try and work on, and I make it a point of emphasis to have it be an intention every single day and be like, what am I focusing on? And it's never about the outcome,
Mhm.
right? It's always about like, how can I get so focused on this process, this activity, this, whatever it is that I've outlined is going to get me to where I want to be and like create the life I want.
Mhm.
Like that just keeps my, I think, perspective in a place that makes it easy to show up every
Yeah.
day. And
Yeah.
also, I think really at the core of a lot of it is like the challenge is putting so much of our, like we've been conditioned really since we've been kids, right? To put so much of our self-worth and our value in how we perform, especially these guys too, like perform or, protect and provide and really
Mhm.
performance
Mhm.
feels like it's tied to that. And so much of like, man, I have to do all this in order to feel like I'm successful. And really what I work on with a lot of guys is changing that inner narrative and helping guys understand like, man, you actually don't need to do anything to
Mhm.
have self-worth and value. Like you are as you are. Like you've simply have just learned otherwise throughout different parts of your life. And we just need to remove that and unlearn the nonsense that we've been taught. So that's a big piece of it, because
Mhm.
otherwise, if we keep trying to chase something and keep putting our happiness and self-worth into things outside of us
Mhm.
or things out into the future, like that's a recipe to just never feel worthy and valuable. Because when you externalize it, what happens when that stuff goes away? You're susceptible to the loss of it. If you don't hit quota, if you miss the sale, then you feel like shit. And that's
Yep.
just a vicious cycle. And even when you do hit it, what happens? You're stoked for a second and then you're back to being stressed out and worried.
Mhm.
So really at the core of a lot of this is understanding your values as a human being, your worth, like
Mhm.
showing self-love, compassion for yourself, which by the way, I know how that sounds coming out of my mouth, especially for people that have never like done kind of some inner work. Like this isn't stuff I used to even believe or
Mhm.
subscribe to years ago, but through this process of having to figure out a better way to live, those are two things that came up over and over. So thinking of,
Mhm.
myself a few years ago in sales, like first and foremost, I would really encourage that person to dive into what's most important to him in life
Mhm. Mhm.
and what he wants to be remembered as a human being, how he wants to show up every day.
Mhm.
And on that list is not going to be, yeah, I want to be hitting quota. No, it's going to show up as like kind person, compassionate, leading by example, doing the right things.
Yep.
Right. And so when you change the energy that you show up with, like it completely changes how you show up in your sales calls or your prospecting or even like your QBRs,
Yeah,
right?
man. Mhm.
So I really look to focus on like who are you showing up as, and what do you want to lean into, and then to continuously work on your sense of self-worth and self-love and compassion. And because that really just changes who you show up as. If you're showing up as somebody who already has it all, like you don't need anything, like that is a different person that shows up than somebody who is like constantly, spinning their tires trying to like prove themselves through quota attainment.
Totally.
It's never going to
Totally.
happen.
Totally. I love that you said that. I think that alignment piece is so, so powerful as well. And I almost encourage, sales professionals at this exact moment to take a moment and think like, am I aligned with the work I'm doing? Is the product I'm selling something I'm interested in? And am I enjoying even doing this in my day to day? And making sure that there is some alignment there is, I think, really important. And also, to your point of like zooming out a little bit and not getting caught in the rut of the low or the high, and just when you have that zoomed out perspective, I feel like it minimizes the impact of those little highs and lows, in the sense that you can kind of not be as faced, because like you, to your point, you're on track in life, and it's like, guess what, if I miss quote at the end of the day, I got all these other great things that
Yeah.
I am doing right, and just reminding yourself of that, I think it's just huge piece of it.
Yeah. And it's, like we really have to, again, like we're conditioned to think like we need the house and the car and to make a certain amount of money. And, it's this comparison trap. And we're always comparing ourselves to people who are ahead of us. And then we like talk shit to ourselves about why we aren't there yet. And so, some questions I like to ask guys is like, what is it all for?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
look, 200 years from now, you and everybody you know is going to be dead.
Yep.
Okay. So, what is it all for right now? Like, what are
Mhm.
you working towards?
Mhm.
What do you think is going to be different about the future when you make 250K? When you do it, like what's going to be different?
Mhm.
And like getting guys, because a lot of the times through this process, like even just writing it down or speaking out loud, but more so writing it down, these ideas and thoughts become more real
Mhm.
because we're articulating them, putting them into sentences. Whereas if we just let them go by themselves, they just like build this storm cloud. They're not as specific. It's just a general feeling. Whereas if we take time to be like, yeah, what is it all for?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
what am I creating? As opposed to just showing up every day and jumping on the treadmill and hopping off. And like at some point, no, at some point it's going to be different. At
Mhm.
some point, I'm going to have all the stuff that I'm after. Well, what are you after? Well, I don't know, but I'm working towards it and I'm going to get it. And at some point, then when I get all that shit, then I'm going to be happy. It's like, well, wait a sec. What if you just worked on feeling that way right now? What if you worked on creating a life that you love right now, doing the things that you love right now? Like,
Mhm.
why are we just so hell-bent on postponing these feelings into some time in the future
Yep.
just because somebody else bought a new car and we're like feeling bummed that we don't have a car? It's like, dude, your fucking priorities are out of whack.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's like worry more about what's valuable to you in the internal world than trying to prove yourself to others. Again, going back to the self-worth and self-love thing, is like if you're operating from a place where you have everything you need, like you're showing up every day and you know who you are, you love yourself, like you don't need to show off to somebody. You don't need others' approval,
Mhm.
because approval really just means, hey, someone else accepts me, which means they think I'm worthy. And the only reason I even need that is because I myself don't think I'm worthy. So let's
Yep.
just eliminate all that shit. Let's just skip that and work on your view of yourself.
Mhm.
Then you'll find like, oh man, that's a totally different place to live from.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so powerful. And I think building that identity also is really powerful. Like you had mentioned, journaling, um, you know, visualizing that state or that life that
Mhm.
you want, and again, writing it down or reminding yourself, reading it frequently, like creating that identity rather than just being blown in the wind and kind of lost with everything that happens. I think creating that foundation is so important. What would you recommend to the sales professional that's struggling right now with building that foundation, that identity?
Yeah. I have everybody that I work with start with just a few things. I have this like audit, I call it a wellness audit. And, I really look at different areas of their life. I look at like, hey, let's do a check-in on physical health, a little bit of mindset, how you're feeling day to day. Like, what are you doing to take care of yourself
Mhm.
first of all? Like, is your body in shape? Are you fit? And fit is different for everybody, but like, are you generally fit?
Mhm.
Are you active? Are you moving your body? Okay, first and foremost, like, activity and physical exercise is one of the best things we can do, if not the best thing for our mental state, mental health, whether
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
stress regulation or just like, release endorphins, feeling of well-being. Like, it's incredible. So first I'm
Mhm.
like, what are you doing? Are you doing anything for that? Okay, first and foremost, go do that every day.
Yeah.
Let's start with that.
Yeah.
And then I look at things like sleep. What are you doing? Are you drinking a lot? Are you
Mhm.
drinking a lot of booze? Are you going to distractions? Like, how much time you spend on your phone? All people open their phone and be like, give me your screen report. Let's see how many hours you spend on
Yeah.
your phone and social media. Like,
Yeah.
are you, because what I think is like people are frustrated, or they're down or like, oh, these things in life. But it's like, what are you doing for yourself? Are you working out? Are you vegging out watching Netflix every night? Are you eating like shit? Are you treating your body like crap?
Mhm.
Like, man, you're stepping on your own foot. You're getting in your own way. So let's start to like work on the bait. Are you like staying up later? Is your sleeping consistent? You're staying up till 2 a.m. on the weekends? Are you trying to sleep in? Like, there are so many things that we do that really where we get in our own way. So I look at that first and foremost. And then if somebody has all of those boxes checked and they're taking care of themselves, then I start to look at things like, hey, draw a line down the middle of the paper
Mhm.
and get out a pen. And on one side, write everything in my life that fires me up, that brings me energy, that makes me feel wholesome,
Mhm.
like makes me feel in flow. Like, what are the things that I do? Was it hanging out with friends? Is it mountain bike riding? Is it when I'm golfing? Is it when I'm making pottery? Like, it doesn't matter. Anything that
Mhm.
comes up, write all of those things down. Then on the other side, like, what are the things that are total energy sucks? Every single thing, like this should be a long list, both of them really should
Mhm.
be anywhere from like taxes to, QBRs to keep
Yeah.
hammering on. I used to have just the shittiest QBRs. So that's that I still think of. Um, and look at those lists, right? And then what I do from those is like, again, writing, like, we know these things obviously because we're writing them down. These aren't things we don't know. We just haven't taken time to put them down on paper and look at them.
Mhm.
And there's so much power in that. It's like, okay, let's take that. Now I want to know, like, 5, 10 years from now, you have a magic wand. Who do you want to be? What type
Mhm.
of person do you want to be? What do you want to be doing with your day? Are there things in your life you want to have, that you want to build, that you want to create? What are those things? What type of legacy do you want to leave?
Mhm.
Like, how do you want people to remember you? Like, start to craft this story and create this story of who you can lean into. Like, most people walk around without any North Star.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have mission. I don't have meaning. I'm lacking fulfillment.
Yeah.
And of course, like, dude, we're never taught to do this stuff.
No.
And look, this is just one way to do it. Like, this isn't the only way to find that shit
Yeah. Yeah.
forever. But for people who have no roadmap and don't even know where to start, this is at least is a great starting point.
Yeah.
And then I think just simple things like, okay, what are what are some general characteristics of a good life for you?
Mhm.
Start to think about a good day, a good week. Are you working out? Are you spending time outside? Are you
Mhm.
spending time with friends? How much are you traveling? Do you have, like, how much are you working? What are you doing for work? Like, where are you living? And
Mhm.
so just to get them into creation mode and possibility mode and out of this probability
Mhm.
and like, oh, but yeah, no, but I have this, and like I have to work this job and then make this much money. It's like, dude, let's stop this narrative real quick and like let's just get into what you actually want
Mhm. Mhm.
and
Yeah.
get it on paper so we can see it. It becomes more real. When we start doing things like that, by the way, what happens is our brain A starts to believe it, but B starts to try and figure out ways to make it happen. And that's where a lot of the power comes in.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. Even in my own practice, like, manifesting or believing as well that this can happen is so, so powerful, right? Like, so many of us might have that mindset of like, oh, this is probably as good as it's going to get for me. And I'm just doing this because at the end of the day, this is pretty good for me. It's not what I want, but this is probably as good as it's going to get for me. And it's
Yeah.
believing that you can have whatever life you want, and believing that, and then doing what you have to do to get there. And a lot of that is the manifestation of like, this is the life I want.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how I'm going to go about and do it. And I think that fear element really takes over. It can be so crippling, like you had mentioned earlier, like that fear piece of like, but what if, oh, but what will people think? Or,
Yeah.
what if I'm not able to make money doing that and living this life? Like, and it just cripples us, and to the point where the sad reality is it doesn't really allow yourself. You're not even giving yourself the opportunity. You're not even giving yourself a shot at it.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
you, you put
You
yourself out of
know,
the game before you even touch the ball.
Yeah. And one of my favorite things, and I think this is something that helped me, like I was living in San Francisco and I had the opportunity to manage a team there. And I remember having a conversation with my CRO, and he was like, you know what I would really like need you to do and want you to do most is to move to New York City and turn the office around. And that's how that opportunity came up. And, I had never done anything like that before. And the one idea that popped into my head is I was like, wait a minute, if it doesn't work there, I was like, I can always move back.
Yeah.
I can always just come back.
Yeah.
And like, and even if it doesn't work with this company, like let's say I'm terrible at that job and I lose the job, I was like, I can just come back and work for a different company.
Yeah.
And like we don't think of that. We don't say, oh, it's gonna be fine. I heard this thing where it's like it comes down to making decisions and it's talking about confidence and how confident people and successful people like think of decisions, everything. And it's not so much like what we tend to do, right, is ruminate on the idea like, is this the right decision? Is this the best decision? Will this work out?
Mm-hmm.
And the fundamental flaw with that way of thinking is you'll never know. The only way you'll know is with hindsight. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So realizing that and being like, oh shit, why am I doing this to myself? I'm never going to know. Like life is uncertain by nature. So, okay, let's accept that. And instead understand that, look, it actually has nothing to do with the decision that you make, but instead it has to do with how you respond to the consequences of the decision.
Mm. Yeah, I love
And
that.
so
I love that.
whatever happens is fine, but like, how are you going to handle it? How are you going to respond to it? What are you going to make that mean, good or bad?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so for people that are feeling stuck, don't know where to go, and like you said, and even with the manifestation piece, which is for some people seems so foreign,
Can
and
be
it
a
can,
little woo-woo to some.
yeah, and honestly it can feel like not realistic to go from, okay, I'm here and I'm down and like, what am I'm just gonna think like I'm a business owner now and I like have this amazing life. And so there's definitely like there's steps in between, and I think one
Sure.
of them is just focusing on possibility
Yeah.
and thinking about the life you want. And you're not going to know all the steps to get there, of course, because it doesn't work that way. But instead, thinking about like, hey, I've outlined, these things I've won. I've gotten kind of clear ish, it's half baked, which is perfect to start
Mm-hmm.
with. But I encourage people to just look at like, is there maybe a chance this could happen? Is there at least a chance that I could create this life?
Mm-hmm.
Has somebody done it? If
Mm-hmm.
somebody's done it, that means you can do it, for one, too. But it's like, is there at least a possibility? And always like dipping your toe in the water of visualization and all that stuff with just like, okay, is there at least a possibility that this could happen?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's, I think, powerful to the extent of also putting control back and putting yourself in the driver's seat, to what we were saying earlier, right? Like coming full circle in this conversation by believing, or at least thinking this could happen, we're putting ourselves in that driver's seat again, and zooming out, making sure that route that we're on is aligned with the destination or route or path that we're trying to go down. So I
Yeah.
think that's an amazing kind of full circle wrap up there of those points. So that's really good.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the last little tiny bit I
Yeah.
like to add on goals and
Yeah.
when people set directions is like, look, in doing things like this is the purpose of doing that or setting goals or whatever isn't to achieve them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like achieve or bust. It's the whole purpose of setting that North Star is to have something you're working towards. And in that process, learn about yourself and grow as a human being. And if that's what you focus on doing, if you focus on your own growth and your own learning over end results, which by the way, you can't control anyway, like that's where an incredible quality of life comes from.
That's beautiful. And I think that's a beautiful way to kind of end with that thought for everyone. So thanks, Tim. That's
Awesome.
amazing.
Yeah, I appreciate
Um,
it.
yeah, and I guess if people are interested in checking you out or working with you, what would be the best way?
Yeah, so I write on LinkedIn every day. That's probably the main social media I'm on, trying to kick up some Instagram content too, but kind of learning a new social media platform
Yep.
is always a challenge. But that or my website is perwellness.co, and
Okay.
per is just PER.
Beautiful. All right.
Yeah.
And I'll put it in the show notes as well. But as always, it's a pleasure, and thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.